Liao Zhai stories. Fairy Island. It is said that there is a scholar named Cui Mengtu in Chenzhou who likes to travel since he was a child. He often wants to travel across the ocean to visit the majestic scenery and find the legendary fairyland. There happened to be a ship going out to sea, and Cui Mengtu asked to take it with him. Unexpectedly, as soon as the ship reached the sea, it encountered a strange wind, and the huge sea waves beat the bow of the ship one after another. The big ship was swaying in the sea, the sails were broken, and everyone was terrified, thinking that they would die in the sea and would not be able to return home. The boat goes with the waves without any direction. When everyone is discouraged, unexpectedly the boat gradually drifts to an isolated island. The peaks on the island soar into the clouds, and seem to be covered by a layer of green plants. The mountains are green and lush, there are tall green pines and cypresses, and all kinds of nameless exotic flowers and plants, which are really beautiful and unreal things. The captain immediately checked all the books and nautical charts, but he couldn't find such an isolated island, and he couldn't help but secretly marveled. Looking around, there is no one on the whole island, but after going ashore for a while, the more you walk, the more surprised you are. It turns out that there is a strange world inside. There are stone caves and stone rooms inside, complete with tea tables and chairs, and the ashes beside the stove are still warm. It can be seen that there are often people living here. The weather here is sunny and pleasant, much like the mountains and rivers in the south. The mountain springs on both sides of the road converge, rushing towards the gravel in unison, and the sound of water is endless. The vines in the stream are intertwined, and yellow and white flowers are all over it. Many flowers have fallen into the stream and drifted with the water. Cui Mengtu thought to himself, "This is what the fairyland is like." Immediately decided not to go back, went to the boat to get bedding and luggage, and planned to live in the cave. In the evening, all the people on the boat came to persuade him. There is no one here, let alone where it is, so he can't stay for a long time, but he insisted on staying here, saying that there must be a fairy here. Everyone laughed at him, he was either crazy or stupid sick. Everyone went back to prepare to return to the voyage the next day, but there was a sign of wind before sunset, and everyone couldn't help worrying secretly. On the second day, Cui Mengtu was waving his hand to see off the people on the boat at the seashore, when a gust of wind came, and when he looked up, the boat was blown away by the waves. This surprised him, and he thought to himself that they must be buried here now. So he planned to pack up his things and wander around. When he reached the peak, he looked up at the vast ocean, and the water flowed endlessly to the junction of the sea and the sky. Where is the ship? Unconsciously heartbroken. At this time, he lowered his head and looked down at the mountainside, only to see wisps of cooking smoke rising in the distance. Looking down along the smoke, there are people. Overjoyed in his heart, he walked down the hill slowly, looking for a way to go, and walked for several miles in a tortuous way. As I was walking, I suddenly saw a small wooden bridge across the creek. A little girl was squatting to wash clothes. When she suddenly saw Cui Mengtu, she was so frightened that she threw away the clothes in her hand and ran into the house. After a while, an old man and an old woman came out slowly on crutches. The old man is in good spirits, wearing ancient clothes from the Tang and Song dynasties, with a snow-white beard fluttering on his chest in the wind, and he is quite fairy-like. The old man smiled across the brook and said, "Where did you come from, sir? Meeting is fate, why don't you come in? Let's drink fine wine together for a few days." Cui Mengtu quickly walked across the wooden bridge, and saluted the two old people respectfully. "My old man, you are very polite. Please forgive me for entering the treasure land." The old lady also had an extraordinary bearing. Looked she was from a descent family, so he didn't dare to peer her. The old man warmly welcomed him into the house, and asked where he lived and his name, but he was speaking in Fujian dialect, which the old man didn't quite understand. After a while, the old man smiled knowingly, and said, "This is really the babbling of the southern barbarians. Once upon a time, I was fortunate enough to travel south with Prime Minister Zhang and stayed in Fujian for a few months, so I knew something about the words there." Then he asked the level of his knowledge, and the answer was that he was already a scholar. The old man didn't dare to underestimate him, and immediately respected him very much. He immediately asked the old woman to bring her daughter out to meet him. After a cup of tea, he heard the sound of fluttering clothes. When he looked up, he saw that a girl who was not wearing makeup, but she was so noble and dignified, exuding a soft radiance, which made people feel not daring to look directly. Cui Mengtu was stunned for a moment. Unexpectedly, Cui Mengtu couldn't speak the whole sentence when he opened his mouth, and the little girl couldn't even straighten up laughing, then stopped slightly when the girl gave her a stare. The old man smiled and said, "This little girl is also from the South China Sea area. Does her dialect be similar to yours?" Cui Mengtu immediately talked with her in Quanzhou dialect, which is similar to Shaozhou dialect. Although the dialect is different, the conversation is unimpeded. The old man took out the famous 4 books with him, and asked Cui Mengtu to teach his daughter to read them in the future, and enthusiastically kept them until lunch. What was put on the table was just some dried beans and bamboo shoots, which were surprisingly delicious. The conversation was very happy until late at night, and the old man said, "If you don't mind, please stay in our humble house. Although the bedding is rough, it is still clean." Cui Mengtu said, "I have been nagging for a long time, and I dare not take it seriously." The old man's kindness is hard to turn down. In this way, it is better to obey than to be respectful. In addition to the old man's bedroom, there is also a small garden made of rockery, which draws active springs to make a pool and paves the floor with brocade flowers. There is also a huge grape trellis, with thick branches and leaves extending more than an acre long, and the girl's bedroom is located down the trellis. At this time, Cui Mengtu was fascinated by such a beautiful scenery and reluctant to leave, so he paced slowly among the green flowers, and his clothes were covered with a layer of colorful brilliance along with the flowers and leaves. He walked slowly to the end of the stone path, revealing a winding corridor, carved railings, and curved window lattices, which is really a fairyland scenery. Lift your legs and walk forward into the corridor. There are 3 beautifully built rooms with fog pavilions and cloud windows, which are very elegant. Just as he was lingering and amazed, he suddenly heard someone reciting poems aloud inside. He was so frightened that he opened the door curtain and went in, but there was no one there. I also saw the refreshing incense for reading in the stove, the fog-like smoking were lingering, and there were thousands of volumes of ancient books on the shelf. Cui Mengtu took out a few volumes and read them at random. They were all famous scriptures such as Huang Ting and Yu Shu. There are handwritten notes. On the last page is also written, Gushi Shen Baiheng, Ladies' History Book. The handwriting is beautiful, and the writing couldn't be better. He knew that this was the place where the old man's daughter was studying, so he hurriedly left. Just as he turned around, the beautiful young girl suddenly came out from the back porch, and said with a slight smile, "Why did you appear here alone, sir?" Cui Mengtu, "You are being polite. I don't know that this is the girl's study room here. I am here to make amends." On the contrary, the girl didn't mind. She smiled and said, "Now that we're here, why don't you come in and sit down? It's never too late to have a cup of tea." So he offered tea from hundreds of flowers and said, "Drink 1 cup and you won't be hungry for 100 days, and drinking 100 cups can cure diseases and prolong your life." He holds the cup in his hand, the whole cup and tea is white, and he only feels a strange fragrance in his nose. After taking a sip of the cool iced tea, he feels refreshed, and the spiritual mind is clear. The girl asked him about the affairs of the world and the customs of various places with great interest, and asked what dynasty it is now. Although he was suspicious, he answered all of them. Hearing this, the girl counted with her fingers, and suddenly sighed, "It's 600 years in a flash. How did it go so fast?" Cui Mengtu was even more suspicious when he heard this, and said to himself, "This girl is so strange, I will worry about it when I go back." Immediately got up to say goodbye, the girl smiled and walked out the door. After staying for a while, he felt a little suspicious. Although he didn't ask, he knew that this place must not be a mortal world, so he stayed here leisurely, reading and writing in his spare time, and occasionally transcribing some poems of Han, Wei, Tang and Song dynasties for the girl, but never had the slightest idea of returning home. One day, the old man suddenly said to him, "I want to take a trip to the world, and it will take 20 years before I can return. It's just that my daughter can't go with me, and I want to trouble you to take care of her. My daughter and you were originally having marriage connection. Then they chose a good day to get married. On the wedding night, the girl wears noble and gorgeous clothes, her face is radiant and gorgeous, which adds to her charming beauty. Looking at such a charming bride, the groom felt that his life was not in vain. From then on, he was newly married, needless to say. After they got married for more than a month, the old man and the old woman were about to go on a long journey, and Cui Mengtu and the girl went to the seaside to see them off. He saw the old man and the old woman get on the boat, untie the cables, spread the sails, and attract the wind from the sky. Just saw off his parents, and it was so strange to disappear. But the girl didn't show any reluctance or inseparable expression at all. She just said to him sadly, "20 years later, I will see you off like this." The climate in the island is mild, there is no difference between cold and heat, and there is no difference between day and night. Most of the animals have never been seen in China. There is no distinction between the sun and the moon on the island, and the spring and autumn are defined by the opening and fading of flowers. After about 20 years like this, his face has become younger and younger. The days passed quickly, and in a blink of an eye the old man and the old woman came back, and immediately urged Cui Mengtu to board the boat and set off home. But how could Cui Mengtu be willing to leave such a beautiful fairy island and his charming wife? Always reluctant to leave, the old man said, "This is the fate arranged by the heavens. You can't stay for a long time. If you stay, you will be in danger of catastrophe. You are loyal to my daughter, are you afraid that you will never meet again?" Pull his sleeve and forcefully push him onto the boat, and the boat flies like an arrow leaving the string. At night, when he was half asleep, he heard the sound of chickens and dogs in the distance. When he went ashore and inquired, he found that he had arrived in Zapu, Zhejiang. Cui Mengtu was secretly happy to return to the world. Recalling the departing, the girl gave him a small bag, which was hung on his chest before he had time to open it. He carefully took it out from his pocket, and it turned out to be wrapped in pieces of gold leaf. The affection from the past welled up in his heart, and he couldn't help feeling sad for a while. Later, he sold 2 slices for travel expenses, chartered a boat from Zhejiang and returned to Fujian. When he arrived in his hometown, no one knew him. Inquire about relatives and friends in the past, most of them have passed away, only 1 or 2 are still alive, and they are also old and do not know each other when they meet with him. He was sad from the heart, lamenting the warmth and coldness of the human world, and the prosperity and wealth are as fleeting as a passing cloud. Not long after returning to his hometown to settle down, he found that he was out of tune with the times. He was used to the quietness of Fairy Island, and hated the noise of the world more and more, so he closed the door and refused guests. One day when he got up early, he suddenly saw a white crane flying around in the courtyard, as if looking for something, with a red letter in its mouth. When it saw Cui Mengtu, it dropped it. Cui Mengtu picked it up and took out the letter paper, and saw that it said, "You and I have been separated for 30 years, and the peach pits have grown into trees everywhere. But there is no day for you and me to meet. Now I give you a prescription. After taking it, you can stay young forever, waiting for the day when you and I meet." After reading this letter, Cui Mengtu felt extremely miserable and could not help weeping. But still he follows the prescription, boil water to make medicine, and take it every day, and it turns out to be younger and stronger day by day, and he am amazed. Most Quanzhou people are good at sailing and have been to many islands. Cui Mengtu often recalled the location and scenery of the island, and asked people about the location of the fairy island. He failed to find the answer, but he was still preparing to go to sea to find the fairy island in his heart and meet his former wife. An old sailor who often sailed heard about this and said with a smile, "What a fool! The boats come and go regularly, and are driven by foreigners, and the islands where they are moored are all inhabited. How can there be uninhabited fairy islands? Don't think wildly, it's in vain." However, Cui Mengtu's determination to find Fairy Island was even stronger. He sold all his things for 400 taels of silver, and planned to go to Nanyang first, and then to America. And he had already set a departure time, but he didn't expect that on the night before his departure, a thief entered the house with a knife and found the money pocket under Cui Mengtu's bed. Cui Mengtu rushed forward to snatch it, but the thief hacked him to death. The villagers felt sorry for him, so they could only bury him behind the house and set up a stone tablet as a memory.